All right, if we can get down to it. Um, First, before we begin, first and foremost, I want to thank you as well as welcome you to Occult Topics with the Professor. As always, I always like to acknowledge the fact that if you come through here, you're spending your time, and I appreciate your time because I sincerely believe that time is the ultimate sacrifice in this busy Western society that we live in. So, thank you for your time. And we're like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hit that notification button. And let's get into it. Occult topics with the professor. Now, I had said that I was going to do a follow up to the tarot card, the Chariot, right? But I'm not going to do what I'd intended on doing. What I am going to do a follow up, but what I am going to do that's different is let's do a quick breakdown of these last two cards, and I just want to show how it's made an impact on my consciousness and how you can see these correlations in these relationships everywhere. So, having said that, we're on the Chariot. You see the I have the two images up. You can see the breakdown of the actual chariot. And I also have the image of Abraxas up here on the chariot as well. And we'll get into that. I may or may not share the download I had on Abraxas and his connection to the chariot card. I mean, clearly the chariot he's riding on is enough of a connection, but you have to make these personal connections for yourself. But what I do want to show is uh after diving in on this chariot card, what I spent a week actually meditating and working with this card and dream symbols that I had in relation to the chariot. Had a lot of uh, bomb downloads just from dreams alone. And what affected me, what hit me was I watched the new Thor movie. Well, at the time it was new. I watched the Thor: Love and Thunder, and the first thing I saw the lovers and the chariot playing out before my eyes, and you can see that easily. Thor and Jane Foster, they actually were the lovers. Now, the thing about the lovers card, we covered it before. The lovers card is actually, self consciousness, subconsciousness, and then super consciousness, which is that angel or that deity in the center. Well, the villain the villain actually played the role of the super consciousness. And when the lovers and the super consciousness, when they all finally met up on an equal plane, more or less, the end result was the child who had all the powers of that deity, right? And I just thought it was dope. And to let you know, okay, of course, we see the connection with the lovers card, right? We see Jane Foster and Thor, but then where did the chariot come in? Thor got his chariot doing the show. He got his chariot, and I thought that was appropriate, just based on the fact that number one, it tied in the actual mythology. Thor did have that chariot in actual mythology. He used it to travel around. Matter of fact, whenever Thor was in that chariot, he was known as, I believe, Riding Thunder or something of that nature, And so, just I mean, and this is just a real brief. Now, I won't even call it a decode. I just want to point those few synchronicities out that for me, having have progressed from the lovers card and then on to the chariot, uh, for me it was kind of mind blowing. Matter of fact, just to show you a few other little connections to the chariot, let's go to J.C. Cooper's an illustrated encyclopedia of traditional symbols. And let's see what he has to say about the chariot. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Ugh, I should have been playing the Funkadelics right now. Swing down, sweet chariot, stop and let me ride. Swing down, sweet chariot, stop and you know what I'm saying? But if you think about it, we have all these. We have the Chariot of Fire. That's a opera. Then it was made into a movie. I believe an opera, or it could have been an orchestral piece. But we have all these things, all these you might call them synchronicities, but we have all these symbols in real life. And most don't realize like that song Chariot of Fire is referring to the Merkaba, right? The Merkaba is a spiritual vehicle uh that refers to the chariot, or in particular the chariot card of the tarot, which is just to show this vehicle that you would use to transport your consciousness around. Your body, of course, being the vehicle, is being pulled by, I believe the horses represent your will, the reins, the intellect. Um, Another thing I realized too from my studies on the chariot card. Now on the cards, there's the two sphinxes, but actually they are Amphisbaena, Amphisbaena. These are mythological like reptiles. They're like winged lizards, but they have a face facing in one direction. They have two heads, one on the tail and one on the in the actual face. And so that Amphisbaena represents kind of like the god Janus, and equally applies to the sphinxes in terms of, you know, light and dark, chaos and order, masculine, feminine, and in that nature. But let's go. We're gonna look up the Chariot in J.C. Cooper's book, which is, oh, he says here, the chariot, the human body vehicle with the horse as the solar spiritual vehicle. Chariots drawn by white or golden horses, or sometimes by griffins, are attributes of sky gods who drive the sun chariot across the sky. Fiery chariots are ascent to heaven by the spirit or by divinities or holy people. Now remember, Thor's chariot in the show, he powered it by his new hammer, and it basically became like a warp drive or a mobile Bifrost bridge, right? So even though it was like a rainbow, we can still attribute that to fire because it was something that he used to fuel or propel his vehicle. So, you know, it still applied. Um, Victors or heroes are often depicted driving chariots. These are then a battle symbol. The qualities and intentions of the driver are symbolized by the team driven. E.g., for example, white horses are spirituality, purity, or solar, while Freya's chariot drawn by cats is a lunar and magical symbol. The driver depicts the mind, intelligence, or spirit directing the body. The two wheels are heaven and earth. Oh, okay. Two wheels of heaven and earth. Celtic, Fleetus, goddess of venery and wild things, has a chariot drawn by deer. The solar chariot is sometimes drawn by a white swan or swans. Come on, bud. I don't mind you being here, but you know, get daddy a little bit of, you know, quietness. Just a little bit. I don't mind you being here. Just give me a little bit. The sun chariot is the great vehicle. Christian, the chariot, cart, wain, or ark is the church as a vehicle to convey the faithful to heaven. The two wheels are desire and will. I just did a bomb interview with C. Marie Long and Kay Butterfly, and we actually discussed the necessity of desire and will in your magical workings. I put it up here. We actually went in. It was 5 hours and 20 minutes long. So whenever I can get around to putting some video or some images to it, I'll get it up there. But we went in. It says here, its two wheels are desire and will, charity and prudence. According to Dante, Greco-Roman, the vehicle of all sun gods, driving the solar white horses who, as either the solar or human principle, convey the sun and moon across the sky, e.g. just means, for example, Apollo as solar and Poseidon's white horses as the watery element. Chariot and horses are also warlike attributes of the war god Ares of Mars. Sybil drives Sybil does drive a chariot drawn by lions. See, Sybil, she came through so strong when I started this tarot series that I'm actually now working with her, and I'm seeing her everywhere now. She draws, Cybele drives a chariot drawn by lions. Tritons blowing conch shells draw the chariot of Poseidon. Sabaeos. Buddy, can you close the door for me?
Yeah, I'm gonna close the door.
Good looking.
Thank you.
I'm gonna skip that and go to, well, let me not skip. Let's keep reading. It says Sabazios drives a sun chariot. Jupiter Dolichetus drives a yoke of bulls. Doves draw the chariot of Venus. Stags Diana. Peacocks of Juno. Dogs of Hephaestus. Vulcan. Eagles of Zeus/Jupiter. Goats or leopards of Dionysus and Bacchus. I didn't know that goats drew Dionysus's card too, his chariot. So remember, Thor's chariot was drawn by two goats. And the crazy thing about that is, if you do a little bit of research on Thor's chariot and his two goats that pulled it, Thor actually ate them every night. And as they were gods themselves, all he had to do was wrap them up in their skin, and then wrap the bones up in the skin, and they would resurrect every morning. Now that made me think, I kind of stumbled because it made me think of the correspondence to that in the Thor Love and Thunder. I said another correspondence, something that blew me away when I caught the chariot correspondence with Thor. I looked it up. Shango of the Orishas is actually a correspondence for Thor, of course. And Shango in Judica Illis's book, the Encyclopedia of Spirits, she breaks down how Shango is the god of love and thunder. So for me, that let me know that the connections was right there on point. And more so, it's possible that the Thor movie was more so a story about Shango as opposed to it being a story about Thor, you know. And so let me get here. Now, in the Hindu, the vehicle of the being in manifestation, the charioteer is the self. Now, this is where I learned my understanding of the chariots through the Hindu meaning, from more especially from the Mahabharata with Arjuna. And so it says here, the charioteer is itself, which directs the horses, as symbolized by Krishna, who drives, but is not involved in the fighting or action around him. The horses are the physical life forces, the reins, the intelligence, and the wheel of the driver. The axle is the world axis, and the two wheels are heaven and earth joined by the active axis. The revolutions are cycles of manifestation. Savitri drives a chariot with luminous horses. Soma has the three-wheeled lunar chariot drawn by the pied antelope or 10 white horses. Yeah, well, we know this. If he has three, if it's a lunar chariot that has three wheels, that's the three cycles of the moon, the three phases, uh, waxing, waning, full. It would also refer to the virgin, the maiden, and the crone. Um, you want to use these correspondences as you know them. So it's like giving yourself mental or imaginary rungs on the ladder so that you can get a handle on these symbols. And then from there, you want to go from, like anything. It's like like breaking down a dream. You would, let's say you had a dream and you saw uh, a purple horse, and you might be wondering, what the hell did I dream about a purple horse for? So first you look up the color purple, then you look up horse. Now, most people, if you don't have a huge library, if you don't have books to decode dreams, then you go to Google. You Google dream meaning color purple, dream meaning horse, dream meaning purple horse, right? So once you get that general idea of what that dream meaning is, the next thing to do is say, well, how do I feel about the color purple? How do I feel about horses? And how would I feel about a purple horse? So it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Let's go to this one. This is a dictionary of symbols by J.E. Cirlot, Cirlot. Let's see what he has to say about the Chariot. I'm supposed to be taking my kids to Raising Cane's for some chicken, and then decided, you know what, I'm gonna do a quick YouTube before we dip, because you gotta put in the work before you get the treat, right? So, okay, J.E. Serlot, he actually has something on just the Chariot, and then on the Chariot, the Tarot card. So that's going to work out perfect. So it says here on the Chariot itself, one of the basic analogies in the universal tradition of symbolism is that of the Chariot in relation to the human being. The charioteer represents the self of Jungian psychology, the chariot, the human body, and also thought in its transitory aspects relative to things terrestrial. The horses are the life force, and the reins denote intelligence and willpower. This is a meaning which also appears in Kabbalistic writing, where it is given the name ascribed to the chariot itself, Merkaba. We were just talking about the Merkaba and its relation to the chariot, right? So it definitely applies to the chariot card. And remember, if you went to Kabbalah, the chariot, oh, I forget what the number of that path is, but I do know that it is the path from Geberah, which is Mars, across the abyss to Binah, right, which is Saturn. And so that's important as for a vehicle to travel across that abyss. I think it's fitting that the chariot is represented by that path, because that would be very necessary to be in control of self, to have a mastery over heaven and earth, um, uh, to have a firm grip on the reins, which represents your will and your intelligence, so on and so forth, right? The sun chariot is the great vehicle of esoteric Buddhism. The chariot of fire, according to chariot of fire. See, that's what comes to mind. So for me, I know I got a nice little storehouse of knowledge, TV, movies, funny shit. And so for me, that helps me to kind of grasp on. Only thing I don't expect them to mention here is Parliament. Swing down, sweet chariot, stop and let me ride. According to Renee Gunon, the chariot may be a symbol of the dynamic and overriding power of the subtle mind. I can see that also. Be that as it may, tales about gods or fairies traveling in chariots across land, sea, or sky are very frequent and of obvious symbolic interest. The exact details of the vehicle and the animals drawn in is always contributes something to the symbolism of the chariot as a whole. I'm gonna look through this a little more. Here it says, let me read it. So Perrault, in his literary version of the folktale La Biche à Bois, each fairy had a chariot of different material. One was made of ebony, drawn by white pigeons, white and black, polarity, duality. Others were of ivory drawn by crows. Others were made of cedar wood. When the fairies became angry, their chariots would be harnessed only to winged dragons or serpents breathing fire out of their mouth and eyes. The sun chariot, or the chariot of fire, is, in Loeffler's view, so powerful an archetype that it has found its way into most of the mythology of the world. When it bears a hero, it becomes the emblem of the hero's body consumed in the service of the soul. The appearance, nature, and color of the team of animals drawing it represent the qualities, good or bad, of the motives driving the chariot onward in fulfillment of its mission. Hence, for example, the horses of Arjuna in the Vedic epic are white, signifying the purity of the driver. A regional Polish tale has it that the sun chariot is drawn by three horses, one silver, one gold, and one made of diamonds. This threefold aspect comes from the well-known significance of the number three, as in the triple mandalas and other comparable symbols and emblems. Now, here's what it has to say about the actual chariot card. The seventh enigma of the tarot pack. It depicts a youth clad in a cuirass. Cuirass, I believe, is either a sword and armor or just a sword, bearing a scepter and riding in a symbolic chariot. He incarnates the higher principles of man's nature. In the chariot, there can be seen an emblem of the Egyptian winged globe representing the sublimation of matter, sublimation being the process where a solid becomes a gas, or denser physical consciousness ascends and becomes, for lack of a better term, godlike, you know. Where was I at? It says, in the chariot there can be seen an emblem of the Egyptian winged globe representing the sublimation of matter and its evolutive motion. Furthermore, the chariot has red wheels, which are to be related to the whirlwinds of fire in the vision of Ezekiel. So we know that the fire is there. We just read in other chariot myths around the world, there's always that fire element. But I would say also that, considering that the chariot in terms of Kabbalah is crossing from Mars to Saturn, or Geberah to Bina, I think the red is very appropriate. The red's very appropriate, especially considering it just left Mars, right? Where was I? It says these wheels stand out in contrast to the blue canopy or pallium, which covers the chariot, signifying the difference between the absolute and the relative. The allegory of this image is reflected in the smallest details. So, for example, the cuirass, the charioteer, represents his defense against the baser forces of life. It is secured with 5 gold studs denoting the 4 elements and the quintessence. On his shoulders, there are 2 crescent moons representing the world of forms. The chariot is drawn by what at first seems to be a pair of sphinxes, but which is in fact a 2-headed, oh, here's that word, here's that creature, but which is in fact a two-headed Amphisbaena, symbolizing the hostile forces which one must subjugate in order to go forward. If you want to look that word up for yourself, do your own research. Amphisbaena, Amphisbaena. It says, in the same way as the 2 serpents counterbalance one another in the caduceus. Basil Valentine, in his Les Azoth des Philosophies, Paris, 1660, illustrates the principle of duality with the serpent coiled around the sun and moon, its extremities bearing the likeness of a lion and an eagle. This tarot mystery then is associated with the concepts of self-control, progress, and victory. Since I'm mentioning Kabbalah, we're going to get into it and see what Robert Wang has to say about the Chariot. On my way to the Marriott. Food cemetery where fools get buried on. Made me think Ice Cube for some reason. In the Marriott, on the Chariot. All right, let's see here. I have a highlighter with me, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to read this book so many times. I don't even have to highlight this go around. Here we go. The Path of Chet. The Chariot, the 7th key. Path color, red, orange. We just talked about it. I wonder if in the front of his book, what color does he have that path? Kind of close to a red, orange, I guess. Good thing about Robert Wang's Kabbalistic Tarot is he has this image of the tree up, and the path would be right here. That being Geberah, that being Bina, this path in between is the path of the chariot. So it says path color red, orange, related sound, C sharp, sign, Cancer, cardinal, water, simple letter speech, esoteric title, the child of the powers of the waters, the Lord of the triumph of light. 32 paths of wisdom. I said it was the 17th path, it's the 18th. The 18th path is called the house of influence. By the greatness of whose abundance the influx of good things upon created beings is increased. And from the midst of the investigation, the arcana and hidden senses are drawn forth, which dwell in its shade and which cling to it from the cause of all causes. That was a mouthful. I'll read that one more time. The 18th path is called the house of influence. By the greatness of whose abundance the influx of good things upon created beings is increased. And from the midst of the investigation, the arcana and hidden senses are drawn forth, which dwell in the shade and which cling to it from the cause of all causes. We're talking origins. We're talking point within a circle, or educare. I believe that's the word, the Latin word for education, to draw from within or to draw out, draw forth. So it says here, the path of the chariot runs between Gebarah's strength and Binah, the great mother, on the tree of life. It is the highest and thus the most profound path on the pillar of severity. It is also the third initiation in the series of the hermit, strength, and chariot, meaning that it is an introductory experience to the supreme spiritual self. Well, that's the 3 degrees, huh? It is also the third initiation in the series of the hermit, strength, and chariot, meaning that it is an introductory experience to the supreme spiritual self. I'm definitely going to have to leave a note for myself about Bayok. Shame on me for not having no lighters close. I mean, no highlighters close. Oh, but I do. But I do. I need it in my life. I want it in my life. I'm going to keep it in my life. Come put it in my life. All right. So I made myself a little note to further investigate this triplicity of the hermit, strength, and the chariot. This is in a hermetic, it's a hermetic initiation of sorts, I would take it. To the supreme spiritual self. Need myself a good note at the top, so I stop. Hermit, strength, chariot. I'm going to put initiation. Okay. Now let's move on. It says here, it is an initiation across the abyss. Appreciating that once one crosses the abyss, all of its crossing paths are understood. The 4 paths beside the high priestess are in toto. That means complete, total. The experience of the Garden of Eden, as well as will be understood by considering the element attached to the path. The chariot is watery, the lover's airy, the emperor's fiery. Okay, let me go back. I'm skipping as I'm reading. It says here, the high priestess are in toto the experience of the Garden of Eden, as will be understood by considering the element attached to each path. The Chariot is watery, Cancer. The Lovers is airy, Gemini. The Emperor is fiery, Aries. And the Hierophant is earthy, Taurus. These are also the 4 rivers of paradise which flow together into Tiferet from the path of the high priestess. I said I wasn't going to highlight nothing. You got me messed up. I use my pen because I want to use this certain color so to jump out. What up, Cat?
Nothing much.
Old man won't be too much longer. We're going to get going. I'm only reading out this one book.
Okay.
You heard me?
Yeah, I heard what you're saying.
You heard me? Yeah, you ain't fooling with me, huh? I'm just messing with you. Matter of fact, let me see how many pages I gotta read. How many more? 1, 2. I ain't that many. A few pages, but and then we're gonna get up out of here.
Okay.
The Chariot represents a completion which Waite called a conquest on all planes, meaning the Chariot carries the influence of the higher to all of the lower planes. The 32 paths of wisdom describes this as the house of influence, by the greatness of whose abundance the influx of good things upon created things is increased. Here, the ancient text implies that through this path, one may discover the secrets of the hidden senses which dwell in its shade, meaning the supreme darkness above the abyss. What is that? Oh, that's my phone. The heck? Travis Major just started talking away while I'm getting down, huh?
Okay.
Where my phone? Oh, you listening to Travis Major, bud? I don't know. Wow, now that's crazy. In the middle of talking Kabbalah, Travis Majors pops up. I think that's pretty dope. All right. I don't know how that happened. I wasn't watching YouTube before the show, before this kicked off. Okay, where was I? It says the Chariot represents a completion which Waite called a conquest on all planes, meaning that the Chariot carries the influence of the higher to all the lower planes. The 32 paths of wisdom describes this as the house of influence, by the greatness of whose abundance the influx of good things upon created things is increased. Here, the ancient text implies that through this path, one may discover the secrets of the hidden senses which dwell in its shade, meaning the supreme darkness above the abyss. So the Chariot is key to understanding these not unfathomable, but these hard to grasp archetypes. This card also represents the vision of Ezekiel, wherein the prophet described the appearance of 4 living creatures. Each had 4 faces, that of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. Besides each of these creatures was a wheel, like a wheel within a wheel. Whenever I hear about the man, eagle, lion, what is it? The ox, man, lion, ox, and eagle. I always think of the swastika. That implies movement. And then from there, Ezekiel went on to describe it was like a wheel within a wheel. And as the creatures moved, so the wheels moved. Above the heads of these apparitions was a vault glittering like a sheet of ice. Above the vault was a throne, and on the throne was a radiant figure. The implication is that the creatures, elemental energies of the manifest universe, are the Chariot. Students of Jewish mysticism may be naturally curious about the roots of this card, since it is suggestive of one of the most important trends in early Jewish thought, that of the Merkaba. The Merkaba is the chariot which carries the throne. Of this trend, Gershom Scholem, who I have a couple of his books. Oh yeah, I have Gershom Scholem on the mystical shape of the Godhead. Gershom Scholem says the earliest Jewish mysticism is throne mysticism. Its essence is not absorbed is not absorbed contemplation of God's true nature, but perception of his appearance on the throne as described by Ezekiel. He further states that while in the earliest days, writers spoke of the ascent to the Merkaba, presumably meaning a journey into the depths of self. One way or the other, there is the implication that the chariot is stationary, as it is shown in Waite, Crowley, and Marseille's cards, and imagery supported by Case, who says that the number of the card 7 is traditionally related to rest, which it is. This is a mystery, and when I say the number 7 is related to rest, you take into account the biblical account in the Bible in Genesis that on the 7th day God rested. That is essentially the meaning of Sabbath or even Saturn is labor to rest. It's showing it's a completion, but a lot of people think of 7 as kind of like being a perfect number, you know.
Wow.
7 heavens and all this and that, but it's not so much a number of perfection. That would be 10, right? Consisting of 1 and 0, right? The number 7 implies rest, completion, and rest. But we know that from labor to rest, you return back to labor again. That's life and death, labor and rest. Rest being synonymous with like death. You say rest in peace. This is a mystery, for while the chariot moves continuously through the plains, it is at rest. Of course, the fact that this card is a clear reference to Ezekiel does not mean that it is indisputably related to Merkaba. Ezekiel was a very popular figure in the West during the apparent period of the invention of Tarot, as art attests. If we are to supply that, or if we are to suppose that the originators of the Tarot had even the slightest knowledge of Kabbalah and Jewish metaphysics, which they do, is evident by the fact that Tarot lines up perfectly with the Hebrew alphabet and the Kabbalistic tree of life. So we know they have some kind of understanding. We must assume that they were familiar with its oldest expression, Merkaba, and would not have used an image of a chariot casually. The intention here is not to attempt to answer the question, only to acknowledge that it exists and that it is one which may cut to the very core in defining what is modern and what is ancient in the systems of Tarot. Alive is Levy, who is something of a bridge between ancient and modern esotericism, made an interesting contribution in his design for the Chariot card. This was never a part of Levy's deck, although Oswald Wirth incorporated most of Levy's ideas into his Tarot of 1889. In Ritual of Transcendental Magic, Levy wrote of the chariot, a cubic chariot with 4 pillars and an azure and starry drapery. 4 pillars, azure and starry drapery, and that is the clouded canopy. I'm gonna highlight this before we move on. In this chariot between the 4 pillars, a victor crowned with the circle adorned with 3 radiant golden pentagrams. Upon his breast are 3 superimposed squares. On his shoulders, the Urim and Thummim of the sovereign sacrificer, represented by 2 crescents of the moon in Gedula, Chesed, and Geberah. In his hand is a scepter surmounted by a globe, square and triangle. His attitude is profound and tranquil. A double sphinx or 2 sphinxes joined at the haunches are harnessed to the chariot. They are pulled in opposite directions but are looking the same way. They are respectively black and white. On the square, which forms the forepart of the chariot, is the Indian lingam surrounded by the flying sphere of the Egyptians. Waite followed Levy closely, his only iconographic contribution being the addition of a river behind the chariot. reference to the water flowing. It's in reference to the waters flowing from the high priestess and to the water sign Cancer. He has also added a city which we may interpret to mean the heavenly Jerusalem or the city of God above the abyss. Thus, the chariot is shown as an intermediary. It is both the above and the below. It is perfect control on more than one plane of existence, while at the same time, it protects the sanctity of the throne by maintaining the necessary separation of those planes which it affects. The relationship of the relationship of chariot to throne is amplified by our knowledge that the angels of Bina are called Erelim, thrones, while those of Hokmah are called Alphanim, wheels. This is consistent with the idea of Bina as represented as all three supernals, Bina, Hokmah, and Kether, and it is important insofar as the throne is actually Kether. If it is not of Kether, it is Kether. But it is not of Kether, it is Kether. Read that again now. This is consistent with the idea of Bina as representative of all three supernals, Bina, Hokmah, and Kether, and is important insofar as the throne is actually Kether. It is not of Kether, it is Kether. So that means in Ezekiel's vision, the throne was, yeah, that's the root word of television. There is, come on. You ready to roll?
Yeah.
Just give me about 20 minutes.
Okay.
There is no way in which these relationships can become comprehensible except through meditation, and the student should not feel discouraged if the words seem difficult. The really important point here is the relationship of the divine spirit to that which in some way contains it. And here it is capitalized, which in some way contains it. The meaning of the Hebrew letter Chet attributed to the 18th path is fence or enclosure. The chariot is a wheeled enclosure which holds the spirit in its movement through all planes. Two principles can be derived here. First is the very idea that an enclosure is necessary, something external to the self, which carries that self through various levels of manifest. So the enclosure could be the human mind. It could be the body or the mind. Two, the idea that the vehicle serves a protective function. As Case's book of tokens says of Chet, I am the hedge of protection, enclosing the field of existence. In this field thou dwellest, and I am thy defense against the darkness which is without. Yet is this hedge of safety. Yet is this hedge of safety as a wall of limitation. We're talking Saturn here. We're talking, okay. And the darkness against which it defendeth thee is the radiant darkness of the limitless light, too brilliant for thine eyes. In interpreting this passage, Case refers to the Ein Sof, which is to us a darkness because it transcends our earthly vision. He also relates this to the idea that Osiris is a black god, meaning that Osiris, a sacrifice god, was resurrected and then arose above the light to a darkness which is at the very pinnacle of the supreme spiritual self in Kether. This experience of spiritual self, pictured in the chariot, has also been described as the exaltation of the alchemy, where the alchemist becomes the philosopher's stone. Of the four versions of the card, Crowley's most strongly emphasizes the relationship of the chariot to the text of Ezekiel with its living creatures. His card expands on the dual sphinxes proposed by Levy, whereas the Golden Dawn follows the earlier design of the Marseilles deck, in which the chariot is drawn by two horses. Crowley states that he was much influenced by Levy's card design, and since he also claimed to be Levy's reincarnation, he may have wanted to emphasize the development of his earlier work. He has thus taken Levy's dual sphinxes and turned them into four cherubim. each of which has 4 sub-elements, as in the tattvas. This is consistent. It always comes back to the Vedic information. That much I've noticed. It always comes back to that. This is consistent with the biblical text, which describes each of the 4 creatures as having 4 faces. Moreover, we have previously made the connection of the Sphinx with the pentagram, which represents the 4 elements crowned by spirit. The pentagram, as a 5-point figure, is appropriate to Geburah, the lower end of this path. Geburah is also symbolized in Crowley's card by the red wheels, meaning that its energy is the motive power of the chariot. We figured that out just a few minutes ago, right? That red is indicative of Mars or Geburah. The complement of Geburah, the complement of Geburah Chesed is implicit here in the various uses of the 4. Chesed Jupiter is important on this path because it is the beginning of manifestation in macroprosopos, the 4 elements which are symbolic support of the heavens. In the cards of both Crowley and Waite, the Bina canopy is supported by 4 pillars, which are the elements, and which are the Yod He Vav He. These are also the 4 columns of the Tree of Life in the solid sphere cover illustration. Okay. 4 pillars. When you see it in this 3-dimensional makeup. I would say if you don't have Robert Rain's Kabbalistic Tarot, even if you're not into Kabbalah like that, you would have to get this book. Kabbalah, Tarot, and astrology all go hand in hand. There's no point in learning Tarot. That's like you enter the race with both hands tied behind your back on one foot. Above the golden armored figure in Crowley's card is a crab, symbol of the sign Cancer. Almost imperceptibly woven into the canopy in a fine gold line is the word abracadabra, and apparent pun on abrahadabra, a word which Crowley called one of the most important key words of the Liber All, the word of the Aeon, the cipher of the great work. The value of this word corresponds to Chet, which is 8, 10, 400, 418. Also, that is the connection to Abraxas. Abraxas, the name Abraxas serves the same function as the word abracadabra. One significant idea found in the Crowley and Golden Dawn cards is the implication of something material, not unlike the Bhagavad Gita, where the pursuit of enlightenment is symbolized by warring factions which understand to be within each seeker. Here on the highest path of the Pillar of Severity, the soul warrior of Geburah has reached the pinnacle. Crowley shows him with 10 stars on his armor, representing Asaya, matter, and seated in a position of sublime meditation. In his hands, he holds the Holy Grail, a cup into which we look directly. For their cards, the Golden Dawn chose to represent Odin, god of war, usually shown riding through the sky. The attribute of Odin is appropriate insofar as he was also a god of spiritual development who, like the chariot, has been related both the above and the below. So the way that the chariot is both above and below, the best example of that is because it crosses the abyss. The 7 emanations below the abyss, that represents the denser planes, materiality, what we call life. And then everything above the abyss, which is Binah, Hokmah, and Kether, those are the ascendant heavenly, for lack of a better word, emanations, right? So that's the above and the below. It's about one wheel is red and one is yellow, or however different people choose to signify the wheels, but we know that the wheels represent earth and heaven. We got a foot in both worlds, you know. The primary emphasis of the Golden Dawn card is on the control of the dualities and manifestation by the supreme spiritual self. Here, the black and white horses are commensurate with Levi's black and white sphinxes, as well as with the black and white columns of the mysteries called Jachin and Boaz in the Temple of Solomon. Between the two horses is an eagle's head, the cherubic symbol for water. The chariot itself is blue to suggest chesed. The orange of the warrior's robe refers to Had, the intellect. Thus, we are pointed towards the magician, the path to which Mercury is attributed. Weight also refers to Had by using an 8-pointed star on the crown of the charioteer, personification of the spiritual self. As was mentioned, the movement of the chariot conceals a mystery of great significance. In the Golden Dawn card, it clearly descends from the sky, symbolizing the descent of the Holy Spirit into manifest creation, the influx of good things upon created beings. This is a much more simple iconography than is found in the cards of Crowley or Waite, and is reminiscent of the chariot of the sun. In Greek mythology, the chariot of Helios, the sun, moved daily across the sky, pulled by 4 horses. The relationship of the sun to the chariot card is of critical importance because the chariot moves between the light, centered in Tifereth, and the supreme darkness at the hidden side of Kether. In Waite's card, this chariot is a stone cube referring to the physical universe, as well as to the cube of space, which Gareth Knight has called a construct within Tifereth. This idea, now what I find kind of trippy for me is that in my studies of Saturn, we find that the sun, people like Bobby Hemmett and others have said that, well, there's another sun, there's a hidden sun, there's a sun behind the sun. Well, there's also this belief that Saturn was the first sun, right? And within it's said that within the sun there's a black dot. There's a darkness within, kind of like the yin and yang symbol, where you have this darkness with the dot of light, and then you have the light with the dot of darkness, which is to say that the light side would be considered the sun or light, but within that is a heart of darkness, because we know that light emanated from darkness, and even within the darkness there is a core of light. And there you have it. But another complexity must be introduced. Despite the fact that the chariot is related to the sun, it is guided by the moon. And from the standpoint of the tree of life and of the earliest Greek mythology, the sun is subordinate to the moon. The chariot follows this order, for it is the sign Cancer, ruled by the moon, and in which Jupiter is exalted. On the tree of life, the path leading from Tifereth to Kether is the cardinal path of the moon and of water, the high priestess. What takes precedence here is the water, pure consciousness, that the moon represents. It may also be mentioned that in the symbolic pantheon of metals, silver at one time also took precedence over gold. It was not until the period of Greek history when the Apollo myth began to take over from that of Helios as the sun, even coming to be represented as driving the chariot of the sun across the sky each day. That sun began to be considered of greater importance than the moon, because previously it was all everything was lunar. The lunar calendar is the first calendar, and so on and so forth. All of these symbols are, of course, deeply involved with the history of religious and with anthropology, which assigns occasionally contradictory meaning to a given symbol. The corrective is that the tarot cards are archetypal images, represent truths which remain immutable despite the limitations and attempts to describe them. Wow, that was powerful. That was dope. I'm glad I did this, if nothing else, but for the Thor breakdown and tie in, and then to show this Abraxas connection, as well as any other connections in terms of chariots and gods that drive chariots. So hopefully this was a cool follow-up. We'll be diving into the next part of the series. I'm going to try and present that tonight. If not tonight, then we'll have to hold out a little while longer, because I do have a couple interviews that I've recently done that I want to get together and upload. So we'll see what it do. As always, thank you for your time. Like, subscribe, share. I tried giving away a book. Nobody seems to want them. So, hey, it's all good. Next time I do it, I'll give away another one, But having said that, thank you for your time. I appreciate the feedback. D Brown, definitely appreciate you. Society Ejects, definitely appreciate you. Cosmic Chlorophyll, definitely appreciate you. Everybody that's been tapping in, giving me good feedback, I appreciate it. So we're gonna wrap this thing up like a safe sex commercial, and I will holla at y'all when I holla at y'all. Peace.